Violence on your job and violence in the workplace violence, continues to be over and over and over talked about in the news. What is workplace violence? How does it occur? What can you do to identify it? What can you do to reduce the likelihood? Who do you tell? And what are the ranges of violence that can occur? We're going to talk about that today in our podcast. You're listening and watching the Safe, Secure 360 podcast. There's safety in numbers.
Lieutenant Robert Henry is an honorably retired law enforcement commander from Houston with over 35 years of public service experience. I'm Daniel Ziegler. I've been asking questions all my life, and on this show, I do my best to ask the questions that the public would like to know the answer to. The Safe Secure 360 podcast is intended to provide you, the listener, with information about current events and ongoing societal challenges to help make your life safer. Thank you for listening. This is the Safe Secure 360 podcast. There is safety in numbers. Well, Robert, thank you for sitting down to talking with us today. Today we're talking about workplace violence. Before we get into statistics about what it is or about what's going on, what exactly is the definition of workplace violence?
Violence in and of itself is typically related to some type of assaultive conduct or stalking conduct or harassing conduct that is designed to impact the receiver in a negative way. It could be threatening behavior. It could be damage to an object, a car. It could be personal threats, injury to someone. Workplace violence is violence or the threat of violence or associated things around that topic that happen in the workplace, or they happen simultaneously away from the workplace, but it may begin in the workplace or it may be shared in the workplace. So there's a nexus to the job and this event or threatened event. Over 2 million workers in the U.S. experience and report incidents of workplace violence. So it's a pretty big deal. And remember, a lot of those workplace violence incidents are not reported out of fear or fear of retaliation or fear that the company or the workplace may not believe them or may not back them up. So a lot of these things are unreported. About 48% is the number that just aren't reported for all those reasons and perhaps more.
Well, thank you all for watching and listening. If you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe to our channel and click the like button on this episode. This will keep you up to date with what we're up to, and it will help our channel grow and reach new people. Like we always say, there is safety in numbers. Well, that's a big percent. That's half of every workplace violence incident isn't reported. That's really interesting to me. And it sounds like what you're saying about workplace violence is that somebody's actions negatively affect the other people at the office. What types of stimuli would happen in an office that would lead to a workplace violence? Stalking and harassing are one thing, but violence, acting out, assault and violence is a different thing. How do we kind of like register that something's coming up, or what are the warning signs of workplace violence?
You know, there certainly are different ranges of workplace violence, and there's certain steps to take to identify, prevent, and then deal with that if in fact it does occur. A large range. It begins typically with some type of interpersonal conflict with person to person, or supervisor to subordinate, or supervisor to group dynamic, or a new company policy that may limit, exclude, or direct someone to do something that's adverse to them. Or it could be as simple as a workplace relationship that is unwanted or that goes wrong. And the next thing you know, it starts off with water cooler chatter. Then it moves into Post-it notes being left that are threatening or that are disruptive. Then it goes into text messages. Then it goes into emails. Then it goes into more verbal, personal conflicts. Then it may enter into physical engagements. Then it may enter into threatening behavior that's even worse. And it may extend away from the workplace into the home. So it's a dynamic that has to be identified early, reported early, and then steps taken by the company that you work for to have a policy about zero tolerance on workplace violence, and then have steps to take for you if you experience it or you may witness it happening to someone else.
What I just heard you say is that workplace violence can start at a place where it's kind of abstract. It's there's like a weird tension between people, and then all of a sudden, Post-it notes getting left on a desk is a little bit further removed than a text message to their phone. And then that's a little bit further removed from getting yelled at in person. So it sort of gets closer and closer to the person. And a healthy company that's paying attention and people watching their coworkers might notice this thing going on. So if you see some of these steps, somebody's leaving mean Post-it notes on somebody's desk, how do you know at what point you should start reporting it, and what does that report process look like?
I think that if you witness things that are certainly less than subtle, we don't know if the Post-it note was a joke, or we don't know. The person receiving the Post-it note would know. So I think it's incumbent upon them to try to stop that or de-escalate that behavior before it happens. But then once it's clear that it's happening, let's say you're the victim of it, your company should have, and we write policy about workplace violence reporting and reactions. And I think that the first step would be for you to report this to your supervisor or to your human resources department, who may have a open door policy about workplace violence. They may have a policy that says, look, workplace violence is a zero tolerance action. You can come straight to human resources with your issue, and we will document that and investigate it. So I think that if you're a witness to someone who's engaging in workplace violence, but the victim out of fear or out of whatever reason doesn't want to report it, I think that you have the same obligation to let someone know, either a supervisor or human resources, know about these threats or these actions which you've witnessed.
So this is a big deal to companies, and it has a big impact on not only the employees, but on the company itself. What causes these negative impacts? Like, what effect does an act of workplace violence, especially a violent assaultive act, is going to affect the psychology of the workplace for a little while? And it's going to have some other effects of that too. Tell us a little bit about what the result of this kind of behavior is.
Person-to-person conflicts can come from 1,000 different reasons. You parked in my parking space, or you're doing better at sales this month than I am, and you thought it was funny to make sure I understood that, or they perceive something's being treated differently, or there's some type of interpersonal thing. Perhaps there was a romantic attempt made by one to another that was not welcomed, or there could be many, many reasons. But then there could be organizational reasons as well, where the organization is dysfunctional and the organization has a lot of internal stress. We're not meeting our quotas, or we're having our employees do something more difficult in less time. There's more pressure. When that happens, that can begin nurturing a feeling of hostility, perhaps, from employee to employer. And now you have what I would call a collective agenda forming, where multiple employees may be adversely affected by this company policy and may decide that's not right, and we're going to take action against this. And that could be something as simple as a meeting where they voice their concerns. It could be an email, it could be a petition. It could be some types of destructive things towards property that the company owns, or it could be threats towards management, leadership, and ownership. It's a full range. So it's important to identify this early, have a policy in place that addresses this and what the steps are to mitigate this and stop it before it increases.
Is there workplace violence training? As you develop your policy, do you run drills in workplace violence training? What does that kind of training look like?
Absolutely. There's workplace violence training, being aware of the signs, being aware of what workplace violence is. It may not be what you think it is. It doesn't have to be violence. It could be any of the things we talked about. It could be threatening behavior, harassing behavior. It could be unwanted behavior. It could be a lot of different things that sometimes grow and now end up in a physical encounter. So yes, our company, we teach and we do teachings on and write policy on workplace violence identification and prevention. We certainly do. But a lot of companies have a very robust workplace violence policy, probably part of their human resources policy, or they should. And that should give employees who are victimized by this relief and give them a method and a protocol to follow to help them. SAFESECURE 360. We are a security consulting group located in the Woodlands, Texas. We assist our multiple clients by reducing their risk, loss, and reputation impact. We also do full security assessments on their facilities, large churches, large private schools in Texas, and we want to help you. Take a look at our website, safesecure360.com.
A good workplace violence policy would allow the reporting of it and then have clearly defined steps that let's say an employee reports to human resources that they're experiencing workplace violence, or a third party is. The policy would then outline the steps the human resource person would take. Is there anything more to the policy that might go into it that companies could start integrating into their policy?
It certainly needs to be a confidential process where you don't want everyone else to know this. If it's in an interpersonal conflict, you certainly don't want others to know. You want to keep the identity and the topics that the person who's sharing this information confidential. I think that's important. But it depends, on the level of threat. We are retained commonly to go and analyze a high-risk termination where we have a client who has an employee who is made threatening statements or has some type of conduct that has led to or has participated in the decision to terminate that employee. When that decision is made, the client may be nervous or concerned about the organizational safety or their safety if they're the one doing the termination. So we will use our security people, or we'll have off-duty peace officers go there and stand by just in case that could occur. Sometimes these workplace violence incidents against the company turn into horrific crimes where there'll be a board meeting or there'll be some type of adverse employee action. The employee pulls out a firearm and shoots and kills people, and then perhaps themselves. So it's a very important topic to know. It's a very important policy to have, and the steps that you take should be very well thought out so you don't have a heightened risk within your organization.
Any job can be stressful, and jobs with deadlines and high quotas can go further to add stress. What can the leadership of a company do to help alleviate some of the tension about this workplace violence, or even when they see some of these signs starting, when they're seeing harassing behaviors, what should their take be, and what should their set of actions kind of start to look like?
Well, onboarding an employee is where it really starts, and then you have a set of employees who are permanently there, and if not a probationary employee or a new employee, what are the rules of conduct for your organization? What is prohibited conduct, and what can you do, and what can you not do? What is offensive generally? That's pretty subjective, but what is offensive generally? You can't talk about certain things. You can't do certain things. So I think it's important that the employer publishes to the workforce what these rules are. They should be part of an employee packet and an employee manual that the employee has or has electronically, where they'll be given a copy of them. And remember, these rules can change. Think of it as a living document where the policy about workplace violence or harassment or stalking or whatever may change. And now we have to include new things in there or take things out. So when those edits occur and that living document is revised, it's incumbent upon the employer to share that with the employee so they know the ground rules and they know what's proper and what's not. They know what's proper and what's not, unless there's some fringe type unusual rule. And there could be hundreds of them. But all I'm saying is if you act reasonably and there's reasonable policies, you're going to have a better experience than if you don't have a policy and you make these rules up on the fly. It's a bad idea.
You talk a lot about that, a response versus a reaction. A policy allows a response that's repeatable even. We would do the same thing next time given this, or we'd update our policy and then perform our new response. Where a reaction is everybody having to, in the moment, decide what to do. And that's not a good look for something that's so, these workplace violence has violence in the name, but this can really affect your company. It can really affect your employees, and it can just make it impossible to run business anymore. We have some statistics about that workplace violence costs USA businesses $130 billion annually, due to lost productivity, medical costs, and legal fees, and that 1 in 4, 25% of employees that have experienced workplace violence develop PTSD. It probably makes it, if you have a violent incident at work on Friday, I bet the productivity would go down next week at work. It would be hard to focus on your job when you're there. So what can employers do? Let's say that they start to smell that there's a person that's not acting in the company culture. They have a good training, good policy. When they were onboarded, they were told about the strict there's no harassment allowed here, but there's starting to be a little bit of harassment behavior. At what point does the management step in and start to do something about it? And what should their mode of interacting with this person feel like?
Interaction should occur soon. The fair and balanced adherence to the policy should be across the board, regardless of who the employee is, their position, anything like that. There's a whole separate section and topic talk about workplace sexual things happening, quid pro quo and things like that. But for purposes of this podcast, we're talking about workplace violence. That certainly is a violent act, could be as well. But I think that that the employer has a responsibility to create and maintain an environment where people work that is safe. And if they deviate from that by omission or by not doing something, or they're deliberately indifferent, especially when these incidents have been reported, if they don't investigate them and make a finding whether it was true or not true, then take corrective action, they expose themselves to not only civil actions, but also significant reputation impact where someone may not want to be attracted to work there. Someone may not want to continue working there. Other company may not want to do business with you because you have established a relationship based on improper resolutions to workplace violence incidents.
I've seen some of the Occupational Safety and Health Administration statistics say that early reporting reduces violence escalation by 35%. I think that's interesting that a harassing conversation is violent, but a physical altercation is escalated violence. Is there a big trend towards de-escalation, and what does de-escalating a reported workplace violence incident kind of look like?
You asked earlier if there are drills. I'm not aware of any drills for this topic. However, there are certainly trainings that can occur, HR-based perhaps. There's a training on workplace violence, identifying the steps and what you should do. That is common, or it should be. There should be a clear ability for the employee to reference and understand what the company's policy is about these things. And then I think that it's very important that when an outcry is made by someone, that it's taken seriously and not just, oh, that's just Jim. He treats everyone like that. Remember, it doesn't have to start off with incremental, small, little things. It can go straight to number one, where someone's using deadly force in one of these incidents. So it's important how you hire someone, I tell my clients, but it's also important how you terminate someone. It's a very personal thing. And if you've done your due diligence and this is your conclusion that you're ready to do and you've decided that's what you're going to do, my opinion is it should be done very professionally and very ethically and very sensitive to this moment, because it is certainly those things on the receiver's end. So being aware and taking certain precautions on a termination that you think may be problems is very smart.
Another thing that's related to workplace violence and considered workplace violence is that the FBI says that 20% of workplace violence is actually domestic violence from home coming to the workplace. And an example that I read was somebody filed a restraining order, but the person still knew where they worked, so they waited for them because they were easier to find there. And then a violent incident happens at work. Would you go through the same reporting process if a coworker's partner that you know is there yelling at them or exhibiting some kind of violent behavior?
Certainly there becomes a point to where it's no longer manageable by the employer. And at some point, law enforcement should be considered to be involved in this. Don't rest all of your remedies simply on the employer. They may not have direction or control. You may be an external person. It may occur in your home. Those are law enforcement matters in which the police should be contacted and let them decide the appropriate enforcement action, if any, during that time. I want to talk about one thing that I saw about the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, an OSHA-type company group in the government. And they said that 75% of workplace reported violence happens in the healthcare industry. That's unique. That's unusual to hear. For me, it surprised me. Why is that? Well, think about it. Healthcare industry, and we'll go all the way from hospitals to urgent care to home health care, all of them are emotionally charged environments. Someone's sick, someone's dying, someone died, someone's injured, someone's hurt. Those are very emotionally charged environments. And sometimes the workplace violence can occur because of the stressors that the people that we have care for us experience. It could be worker on worker. It could be family on worker. It could be a lot of different combinations. But that statistic is very, very high, 75% in the healthcare industry. But I think when you think about it and see what happens in that dynamic of caring for people who are in emergencies or chronic care or emergency care or someone that's been shot or stabbed or dying, it's very emotional. And I think that opens the emotion, opens and triggers the chance for violence to occur. So that's the interesting statistic. So I hope that our hospitals and our healthcare people are really doing trainings on this and really up to speed on how this phenomenon could affect them and their industry.
The FBI reports also that de-escalation training lowers incidents by 20%. And then the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, just another de-escalation statistic, is that on-site security decreases violence by 25%. Maybe they're used to seeing security, so it curbs some behavior that might just go free otherwise. As you're talking about the healthcare industry seeing such unprecedented numbers of this, it occurs to me that if you're in termination is a life-changing experience for the recipient of the termination. And what's similar in the medical industry is that getting a diagnosis of cancer, for instance, that's a life-changing thing that just happened to you. And if it's a stressful situation, it can cause you to not be rational in that way. So maybe industries that are more steeped in life-changing, stressful environments should have higher standards for their workplace violence planning and training. If you're an employee at a company, how do you find out about what your workplace violence policy looks like? Who would you talk to about exploring that?
Employees should contact their human resources department if they have one. If they don't, or they're not a large company, they should contact their supervisor or leadership in the company and say, what is our policy, or where can I find our policy on workplace violence? They may direct you to their website. They may direct you to a company employee handbook that may have it detailed in there. There could be different ways that you receive it.
How would you manage, maybe from an employee, an employer, or maybe as a whole culture, how does it work after workplace violence is reported? What happens afterwards? How do you get back to normalcy at work? What guides that?
I think the process in reporting a workplace violence incident, it's incumbent upon the person receiving the report, whether it's a supervisor or human resources department, to gather as much information as they can. Is this true? I don't know, but is this true? And then once they have all the information, they look at that information, and at some point during their investigation, they form an opinion about how this worked, and if it was violence, and if it was a preparatory sense of stalking or something leading to workplace violence. And then I think that there needs to be some corrective action taken. And I think that could be as small as a documented counseling about this event with the employee, or perhaps even a more extreme resolution of a termination. So I think documentation and following the policy and having a independent, not doing this as friends, but doing this from a human resources focused perspective is a great idea.
A few years ago, you and some colleagues had a video produced about a run, hide, fight drill going on in the workplace.
Yes, actually, the mayor's office in the city of Houston many years ago produced a video. It's a run, hide, fight video produced by the city of Houston, the mayor's office, which is a fundamental part of our run, hide, fight training that we've done for years, both in the department and out. And it's a very good video, and it shows what happens in an extreme case about someone who is a former employee or someone who enters the business and then begins with the intent of harming people and does in fact harm people. And I think that the lesson learned in that is the run, hide, fight paradigm, where you get away from an incident, you hide if you can. If you have to fight to survive, you do. So I think that that is an example, certainly could be of workplace violence, where someone takes it to the extreme. And if that happens, what can you do and what should you do to remove yourself first from that encounter? And then how do you involve law enforcement to be able to resolve that situation?
A situation where someone came in with a weapon or with violence on their mind and is acting out violence, that's a stressful situation that would be hard to figure out what to do during. The advantage of training and preparing your staff and your leadership for this is that you have a policy and a response for it that's ready to go. Is there anything else that employees or employers should keep on their minds in relation to workplace violence? De-escalation seems like having a great policy, learning to de-escalate emotions with your employees, having a good security, either security officer or a security system involved in your company all helps with this. Is there anything else they should do or consider regarding workplace violence?
I think those are all good steps. Just have a zero tolerance on employee misconduct, especially regarding anything to do with violence, stalking, harassment, things like that is a great place to start.
Well, thank you, Robert, for your time. And thank you at home for watching. If you or your employer would like some help with this, we offer workplace violence training as well as run, hide, fight training, and we do drills with schools and crisis managements as well. So we're here to help you, talk to you about your needs, and then help you figure out what the best steps are for you to have a good policy where your employees feel safe. Thank you for joining us this week. We really appreciate your time. Like we always say, there is safety in numbers. Thanks for joining the SAFESECURE 360 podcast. The information provided in our podcasts is for general information uses only and is not intended as legal advice. The views and opinions expressed by the guests are their own. Always consult with a qualified professional before making safety and security decisions. For more information about this topic, check out our website at safesecure360.com.